The hi-hat has a very unique history. It started in not as the instrument that we see today, but it started many years ago, 1925 to be exact, as an instrument called the snowshoe cymbal beater. It was two pieces of wood, two sort of brass cymbals, and a hinge. And so drummers and piano players actually used this to support the backbeat in the early playing days. That instrument lasted practically for about a year or two, and was invented by the jazz timpanist and drummer Vic Burton. But along about 1926 to 27, the low boy was invented, which was essentially a mechanical version of the snowshoe cymbal beater. And it looked a little bit like a hi-hat, except it only came up to about knee height, if that. And why? Because there was no need at this point for anyone to play it with the sticks. No one had thought about this. About 1928, the high boy or hi-hat showed up in some catalogs. And around 1931, we have the first examples of recordings of the hi-hat. The hi-hat's very interesting in that it borrows some techniques from the handheld cymbal techniques of the mid 1920s. The sound, this sound, really comes from this. And so we have we have a very unique instrument. Today's modern hi-hat is not that much different than the original hi-hat in that the cymbals stay open approximately 3/4 to an inch apart, and it's pulled down with the foot, and there's a spring in there that brings the cymbals back in place. The top cymbal is held with something called a hi-hat clutch. So the cymbal hi-hat clutch, which can be some confusing to some people, there's a nut on across the bottom. I'll just take it apart here and show you. Okay, it's like this. It comes off like this, holds the cymbals together, and then we just put it across here and down. Find a spot about, as I say, an inch apart with the cymbals, or a little 3/4 of an inch, so that there's enough air or enough distance so that all the techniques can properly work. Now, the cymbals come together in this way, and sometimes there's an air pocket between the two, and so there's usually a need to put some kind of an angle between the top cymbal and the bottom cymbal. Some people will put a very severe angle here to get this sizzle sound. Technically, most players will actually hold the cymbal like this rather than to rely on the bottom tilter. Okay. Now, the hi-hat is played with the sticks in two primary ways, either with the stick tip or with the shoulder. In most recent years and in most rock styles, most of the playing is done with the shoulder of the stick. In most of the jazz styles, it's done with the tip of the stick. So if we start with the tip, that's that sound. The shoulder. Now a lot of the jazz players, but specifically players, let's say like Roy Haynes or Philly Joe Jones, would use a combination of both of these techniques. Okay, Max Roach, obviously. Using the shoulder of the stick to create a bigger impact, the tip of the stick to play time on. Okay, as we moved into more rock styles, the tip of the stick was not used as much, and um, jazz players, funk players, fusion players began to use open and closed techniques, and those are techniques that are in conjunction with the motion of the foot. Okay, so we have three basic techniques with the hi hat. We have the three basic sounds, I should say. We have foot techniques and we have stick techniques. The stick techniques that we employ are closed hi hat. That's where the foot is actually keeping the sticks closed, the hi hat cymbals closed, I should say. Sometimes the stand is hit. Now, back in the swing days, if we hear some old literature, we'll hear a very high ping. That's because the stands were made of steel. These are not made, they're very sturdy, but they're not made of the same materials, and so they don't resonate quite as much. But nonetheless, that sound is still a part of the tradition. Then we have the open and closed pattern. This is probably the most classic hi-hat swing pattern. That's where we're opening and closing with the foot. Okay, so there's coordination that has to occur there between the hand and the closing with the foot, and in some cases with the other hand helping to close the cymbals. And then finally, then we have the half open. This was a hallmark of the transitional players like Sid Catlett between the swing style and the bebop style, more legato. We also heard, we used to hear Mel Lewis do this a lot with shuffles. Sort of a long sound. He might also use the Chinese cymbals with rivets, but this became sort of a hallmark of his sound as well. So, so those are the three main sounds that we get with the sticks, some of the mechanics, and a little bit about the history.